Hello, and welcome back to I Completed 80s Music with me, the 80s Mixtaper, your tour guide through the best, brightest, and oddest songs of one of the most fascinating decades in music. Today, we'll be delving into the second half of Playlist 18, still really early in January 1981. And what an episode! We have The Clash continuing their output from Sandinista, Spandau's follow-up to Cut a Long Story Short, and we end with another Blondie juggernaut, amongst others. As usual, we can't actually play the songs in the pods due to pesky copyright laws, but you will find hyperlinks to playlists for both Spotify and Apple Music in the episode description, plus a full track listing for those for whom the hyperlink doesn't work on their podcast platform of their choosing. As you know, we love your musings, corrections and recollections on this show, and this week we had some lovely comments on social media for the song DISCO by Ottawan. One in particular caught my eye by Alan Curry, who said, "This was on the first tape I ever owned." I completely understand why, it's a real earworm, but it got me thinking about my first tape. Now, I did mention in the last episode that my first recollection of music was a Top of the Pops album by Hallmark, but this wasn't my album, it was actually my sister's. So then I initially thought my first album was the Hit 6, but that came out in 1987. It had the likes of Star Trek in by The Firm and I Want to Dance with Somebody by Whitney Houston. Absolutely loved that album. But the truth is that that's not the answer either. When I really thought about it, and I'd love to hear from anyone else who had these particular tapes, but my first tape was a Weetabix tape you had to send off for. Doing a bit of Googling, they were called Top Tracks and had 2 songs on each side. And mine was Brain's cassette. Brain was one of the Weetabix characters. And on it there was Bucks Fizz, If You Can't Stand the Heat, the Thompson Twins, We Are Detective, and that's the song that I really remember. Bananarama, Robert De Niro's Waiting, and ABC with The Look of Love. Does anyone else remember these tapes? And if so, do drop us a line to completed80s at AOL.com. That's completed80s is 80s at AOL.com. Anyway, it's now back to the music. Alrighty, we're back with The Clash, picking up where we left off with their 1980 single, The Call Up. That anti-war banger from the sprawling, chaotic, glorious mess of Sandinista. If The Call Up was The Clash flexing their political muscle, their next single, Hitsville UK, released on January the 16th, 1981, is something else entirely. A scrappy, joyful ode to the DIY spirit of the British indie scene, wrapped in a Motown nod that's as cheeky as it is sincere. This is The Clash at their most generous, shouting out the underdogs while still sounding like they're having the time of their lives. This one is a weird, wonderful snapshot of a band refusing to stay in one lane. This is track 8, Playlist 18. Sandinista was a triple LP behemoth. 36 tracks of punk, reggae, dub, funk, and whatever else Joe Strummer and Mick Jones felt like throwing at the wall. It's the kind of album that makes you dizzy, and not always in a good way. By early 81, The Clash were still reeling from the mixed reviews. Some called it a masterpiece, others a self-indulgent slog. But Hitsville UK, the second single off the album, feels like a middle finger to the haters. It's not trying to change the world, it's just celebrating the kids, stealing guitars, and making music for the love of it. The title is a direct wink to Motown's Hitsville USA, the Detroit headquarters where Smokey Robinson and the Temptations churned out hit after hit. Here, The Clash are saying the UK's got its own version, and it's not some corporate machine, it's a network of scrappy indie labels like Rough Trade, Small Wonder, Fast Product, and Factory. The song's a duet, which is wild in itself. Mick Jones shares lead vocals with his then-girlfriend Ellen Foley, a powerhouse singer you might know from Meatloaf's Paradise by the Dashboard Light, or her stint on Night Court. Foley's voice dominates, big and brassy, while Jones sounds like he's just happy to be there, tossing in the undertones. Ellen told Sunfax she loved recording it, multi-tracking her vocals in a laid-back session that felt like a party. She saw the song as a love letter to British punk's roots, a nod to how Motown's raw energy shaped her own musical DNA. The Clash weren't just aping Motown's sound, those lush backing vocals, that peppy rhythm. They were saluting its spirit, the idea of a small operation making big noise. Lyrically, Hitsville UK is a roll call of the indie ethos. Check this out. They cried their tears, they shed their fears, up and down the land. They stole guitars or used guitars so the tape would understand. It's vivid, almost cinematic, kids scraping by, recording in garages, hoping for a spark. Later they sing, no expense accounts or lunch discounts or hyping up the charts. The band went in and knocked them dead in 2 minutes 59. That's the punk dream, right? No suits, no smarmy eels, cutting slimy deals, just pure unfiltered music. They name drop those indie labels, giving props to the scene that birthed bands like Joy Division and the Buzzcocks. It's the Clash saying, we're part of this, but we're also cheering from the sidelines. Chart-wise, Hitsville UK didn't exactly set the world on fire. It peaked at number 56 in the UK in February 1981, a far cry from their bigger hits like London Calling. In the US, it scraped to number 53 on the mainstream rock chart. But this wasn't a song built for top 40 glory. It's too quirky, too specific, with its jangly guitars and Foley's outsized vocals. The B-side, Mikey Dread's Radio 1, is a reggae dub gem, like a pirate radio broadcast from another planet. A later US pressing swapped it for Police on My Back, which is a whole other vibe. What makes Hitsville UK stick is its heart. The Clash could have leaned harder into their rebel image, but instead they wrote a song that's almost sweet. It's not naive. Those jabs at mutants, creeps and muscle men running major labels are sharp, but it's optimistic. Now the boys and girls are not alone now that Hitsville hit UK, they sing. And you can feel the camaraderie, the sense of a movement taking root. This was 1981, when indie labels were starting to challenge the majors, when a band could record in a living room and still blow a hole in the radio. The Clash weren't just documenting it, they were prophesying. Listening now, Hitsville UK feels like a time capsule, but not a dusty one. It's got this infectious energy, like the band's daring you to start your own label, book your own gig. It's the Clash at their most inclusive, inviting everyone to the party. Ellen Foley's vocals give it a soulful musical flair, like she's belting from a recording booth in Detroit, while Mick Jones keeps it grounded, the punk kid who never forgot where he came from. Sandinista might have been a mess, but this song, it's a gem, rough and polished at the same time. So where does Hitsville UK sit in the Clash's legacy? Well, it's not their loudest anthem or their deepest cut, but it's one of their most human. It's a reminder that even when they were globe-trotting rock stars, they were still rooting for the little guy. Next time you're spinning Sandinista, give it a listen, crank it up, picture those indie labels hustling, and maybe steal a guitar yourself. The boys and girls aren't alone anymore. Track 9 today, and we're delving into the jittery, angular world of XTC and their 1981 single, Sergeant Rock is Going to Help Me. This is our first rodeo with these Swindon weirdos, so buckle up for a ride through their story, their sound, and a song that's equal parts catchy, cringy, and controversial. Press play now. Here's the deal. XTC is one of those bands that never quite got the spotlight they deserved, but their influence is like a secret handshake among music nerds. XTC formed in Swindon, England in 1972, starting as a glam punk outfit called Star Park, then the Helium Kids, before landing on XTC in 1976. The core duo, Andy Partridge on guitar and vocals, and Colin Moulding on bass and vocals, met as kids, picking up drummer Terry Chambers and keyboardist Barry Andrews along the way. By the time they were signed to Virgin Records in 1977, punk was exploding, and XTC rode that wave with a twitchy, hyperactive blend of pop, punk, ska and art rock. Their debut White music in 1978 was a frenetic burst with songs like Statue of Liberty getting banned by the BBC for the line, "In my fantasy, I sail beneath your skirt." Cheeky, but it set the tone. XTC were provocateurs, not punks in the Sex Pistols mould, but too quirky to be straight pop. Andrews left after their second record, Go To, in 1978, and keyboardist-guitarist Dave Gregory joined, solidifying the classic lineup. Their third album, Drums and Wires, in 1979, gave them their first big hit, Moulding's Making Plans for Nigel. Great song, by the way, give it a listen if you've never heard it. And it cracked the top 20. But it was Black Sea in 1980, their fourth record, where they really hit their stride. Produced by Steve Lillywhite, it's a taut, aggressive snapshot of their live sound, peaking at number 16 in the UK and number 41 in the US, their best stateside showing. Singles like Generals and Majors and Towers of London charted modestly. But Sergeant Rock, released as the album's third single, was their biggest hit to date. Sergeant Rock Is Gonna Help Me peaked at number 16 in the UK chart on February the 21st, 1981, and hit number 20 in Ireland. Recorded at the Townhouse in London in June 1980, it's a 4-minute blast of new wave adrenaline, driven by Partridge's nervy vocals and a rhythm section that feels like it's mainlining espresso. The 7-inch came with a fold-out sleeve and a poster of the comic book character Sergeant Rock, a nod to Partridge's obsession with American comics, especially Steve Ditko's work. Lyrically, Sergeant Rock is a nerd's fantasy. Partridge, who wrote it, sings as a socially inept guy enlisting the comic book hero to win over a girl. I'm enlisting, overseas aid, need assisting, help with a maid. Get the expert on mademoiselles, he could defuse any bombshell. The chorus doubles down, Sergeant Rock is going to help me, make the girl mine, keep her stood in line. It's meant to be ironic, a tongue-in-cheek take on teenage insecurity, but that line about keeping her stood in line sparked backlash. Feminist critics sent hate mail, calling it misogynistic, and Partridge later admitted it was a misfire. In a 1997 interview on chalkhills.org, he said, "It embarrasses the shit out of me. Of all the tunes I've written that made it to tape, this made me cringe the worst. It was supposed to be ironic, you know. Nerdy comic fan imagines two-dimensional hero who can help him with his unsuccessful chat-up technique. It did not work. It just came out limply crap." The song's controversy didn't stop it from resonating with fans, though, especially teenage boys who saw themselves in its awkward protagonist. A 2020 piece on godisinthetv.zine.co.uk nailed it. When you're a 16-year-old male listening to this song, it resonates. No one with intelligence mistook the song, other than the 99% of us male teenagers wondering why girls were just unapproachable. But Partridge's regret lingered. He called it crass, but not enjoyably crass, and Virgin had to strong-arm him into including it on compilations like Waxworks, some singles from 1977 to 1982. Musically, Sergeant Rock is a banger though. Chambers' drums snap like a rubber band, Moulding's bass prowls, and Gregory's guitar jabs keep it sharp. It's angular, odd, jaunty almost. Partridge's vocals are all manic energy, like he's auditioning for a cartoon villain. It's not as sophisticated as later XTC tracks like Senses Working Overtime, a UK top 10 in 1982, which we'll definitely hear, but it's got that raw live vibe that made Black Sea their hardest hitting record. The B-side, a live medley recorded at the Lyceum in October 1980, showed off their stage chops, back when they still toured. By 1982, Partridge's stage fright and a breakdown in San Diego ended their live career, turning XTC into a studio-only act. XTC's story is one of near misses. They had 10 UK top 40 albums and 6 top 40 singles between 1979 and 1992, but never broke through like contemporaries like Elvis Costello or The Police. Poor management left them in debt despite millions in record sales, and their refusal to tour after English settlement in 1982 didn't help. Still, their influence is undeniable. Bands like Blur, Franz Ferdinand and Block Party owe them a debt. Partridge called them quietly influential, and a 1981 Rolling Stone list ranked them among the 17 loudest bands in the world, ahead of Queen and Kiss. Their fan base skewed 60-40 male, which Partridge found reassuring, thinking they only appealed to computer nerds. Sergeant Rock isn't XTC's finest hour, but it's a snapshot of their early 80s peak. Catchy, flawed and fearless. It's the sound of a band teetering between punk's raw edge and pop's polish, with Partridge's comic book brain spilling onto tape. Love it or hate it, it's XTC in all their quirky glory. Next up, we're back with Spandau Ballet, picking up where we left off with their debut single, To Cut a Long Story Short, that nervy synth-stab banger that stormed the UK charts to number 5 in late 1980. The track was a blitzkrieg of Blitz Club swagger, a calling card for the new romantic movement, all tartan kilts, and we're here, deal with it bravado. It was Spandau announcing themselves as the house band for London's underground dance scene, the kids at the Blitz who'd rather Vogue than Pogo. But now, it's January 1981, and they're back with their follow-up, The Freeze, released on the 12th, trying to keep the momentum going. Spoiler, it's a different beast, colder, weirder, and not quite the victory lap they hoped for. Give this frosty little artefact a listen, because it's got stories to tell about ambition, about dance floors, about the pressure not to flop when the world's watching. This is track 10. The Freeze lands with a thud of percussive kick drums and Gary Kemp's two-fingered synth arpeggios, a sound that's less pop song and more club ritual. It's from their debut album Journeys to Glory, which won't hit shelves until March, but this single's meant to keep the hype alive. The band, Gary Kemp on guitar and synth, Tony Hadley on vocals, Martin Kemp on bass, Steve Norman on percussion and sax, and John Keeble on drums, wants you to dance, not sing along. And that's clear from the jump with Hadley's opening line, Lucine la doule. Yeah, you heard that right, not lagoon, as some misheard, but ladoule per official lyrics. What does it mean? Nobody knows. David Johnson, a journalist from the Evening Standard, was straight up baffled by it, and honestly, same. But meaning's not the point here. As Johnson noted, the song wasn't picked for its singability, it's about new romantic clubbing credibility. It's music for posing in a dimly lit Soho basement, not about belting out at karaoke. The production, handled by Richard James Burgess, leans hard into that club vibe. This is Spandau saying, we're not just a band, we're a scene, and the scene is white European dance music, a term critics slapped on their sound. Funky but not funk, disco but not quite disco, with a chilly Euro edge. Dave Thompson at All Music called it utterly convincing white boy funk, and you can feel that in the bassline strut and the hi-hat's relentless snap. The Freeze debuted on the UK singles chart on January the 24th, 1981, and peaked at number 17, hanging around for 8 weeks. Not bad, but a step down from their number 5 high of their debut. Martin Kemp, in his memoir, admitted this dip was a little worrying. After the industry buzz around their first single, record labels fighting over them after a TV documentary showcased their Blitz gigs, the pressure was on. A number 17 peak felt like a wobble, especially when Ireland gave them number 14 and Spain number 16. The world was watching, and as Martin put it, all those people who congratulated you the week before are waiting for the moment when they can revel in your failure. Visually, The Freeze stays on brand. The cover art, designed by Camberwell College of Art student Graham Smith, keeps the black and white classical motif from To Cut a Long Story Short. This time, it's a chariot from an Egyptian icon reference book, symbolising the Journeys to Glory vibe. Smith was building a whole visual package for the band, singles, album, all matching, all cutting edge. The music video, directed by Brian Grant, mirrors this aesthetic. Shot in 2 sparse rooms, it's Tony Hadley brooding with a mysterious woman in one, the rest of the band jamming in the other, with those same classical motifs on the walls. It's stark, stylish, and very 1981, less MTV gloss, and more art school experiment. The critics, well, they were split. Mike Gardner at the Record Mirror wasn't having it, griping that Spandau thought superbly chunky dance drums could make up for a lack of imagination. Ouch. He felt shortchanged, like the band blew the goodwill of their debut. But others saw the method in their madness. That all-music nod from Thompson praised its funk cred, and fans on Discog forums still rave about its dancefloor mojo. One user called it Euro White Boy Disco Funk, glorious in its pretentiousness, and gave it a 10 for its beat. No chorus, no problem. You don't sing the freeze, you move to it. Lyrically, it's sparse but evocative. It's not exactly Dylan, but it fits the song's icy dystopian groove. Hadley's delivery is all drama, his voice soaring over the synths like he's commanding the dance floor to salute. Gary Kemp, the band's songwriter, was leaning into the Blitzkid ethos, style over substance, vibe over clarity. And it worked, mostly. The song's not built for radio, it's built for Le Beetroot, the Soho club where Spandau's early fans strutted their stuff. So why does the freeze matter? Why is it important? Well, it's Spandau at their most unapologetically weird, doubling down on the new romantic promise of their debut, but taking a riskier path. It's not as hooky as To Cut a Long Story Short, and it paid the price with a lower chart peak. But it's a snapshot of a band refusing to play it safe, chasing the club kids' approval over top of the pop's glory. It's the sound of 1981 London when synths were weapons and fashion was armour. Was it a misstep? Maybe, but it's a misstep that still gets boots on the dance floor. Now we return to a band who are in their pomp and decide to release something a little different, well, a lot different. Whereas Spandau Ballet were concerned that their next track could derail their impending fame, this band already had the cachet to push the boundaries a little more. Madness. Those nutty boys from Camden, still tearing through the UK charts like a double-decker bus with a broken speedometer. Last time we caught up with them, they were grappling with the raw personal sting of embarrassment. A song that turned family drama into a scar-soaked gut punch, peaked at number 4 on the UK charts in November 1980. Now we're fast-forwarding to January the 24th, 1981, and Madness are dropping something entirely different. The return of the Los Palmas 7, a mostly instrumental single that hit number 7 and hung around the charts for 11 weeks. This is Madness leaning into their playful, cinematic side, like a night out at a seaside bar where everyone's wearing pork pie hats. This is track 11. Madness by 1981 are riding high off their second album, Absolutely, which had already birthed Baggy Trousers, which reached number 3, and Embarrassment. They're a cultural juggernaut at this point, the Pied Pipers of two-tone, blending Scar's upbeat stylings with pop's earworm hooks. But the return of the Los Palmas 7 feels like a curveball. Written by keyboardist Mike Barson, bassist Mark Bedford, and drummer Daniel Woodgate. His first songwriting credit, by the way, this track is a departure from their usual lyrical storytelling. It's mostly instrumental, save for some ad-lib flourishes by Chaz Smash, who caps the track with a cheeky "good night" at the end. The song's title, with or without the, depending on whether you're looking at the single or the Absolutely album version, evokes some imaginary lounge act like a band you'd catch in a smoky Tenerife nightclub. It's Madness winking at their own mythos, calling themselves the Los Palmas 7, as if they'd been crooning under palm trees all along. The track itself is a 2-minute burst of pure musical joy, 2 minutes flat on the single, about 30 seconds longer on Absolutely. Imagine a cocktail of jazzy piano, a loping bass line, and a rhythm that's less frenetic ska and more relaxed, almost Latin-tinged groove. It's not the skank-heavy sound of One Step Beyond, but it's got that Madness DNA. Playful, infectious, and a little unhinged. Dave Robinson, the head of Stiff Records, pushed for another instrumental after the success of One Step Beyond, and the band delivered something that feels like a soundtrack to a heist movie where everyone's too drunk to pull it off. The single's B-side, That's the Way to Do It, written by guitarist Chris Foreman, is a Cockney knees up about a bumbling odd job man, complete with hammer and saw sound effects. It's pure music hall madness, a nod to the band's working class roots. The UK embraced it. Peaking at number 7, The Return of the Las Palmas 7 proved Madness could step away from their usual wordy anthems and two-tone beats and still keep the party moving. BBC Radio 2, not exactly the Ska Kids hangout, played it heavily, pulling in an older crowd who probably hadn't skanked since the 60s. The video, classic madness, low budget, high energy, shot for pocket change. It's the band goofing off in a canteen, playing up their nutty boy persona. Some pressings of the 12-inch single came with the first edition of the Nutty Boys fan club comic. This is a band that never met a gimmick they didn't love. The vinyl itself, black, but some copies turn translucent red when held to light, and the B-sides run out groove loops. That's the way to do it infinitely if your needle doesn't lift. Details like this make Madness records feel like treasures from a bygone era. What's fascinating is how this single captures Madness at a crossroads. They're still the two-tone tearaways, but they're stretching their sound, flirting with pop and jazz, laying the groundwork for later hits like Our House. It's a reminder that Madness weren't just about ska, they were about fun in all its forms. The Return of the Las Palmas 7 isn't their deepest cut, but it's one of the most joyful, a snapshot of a band confident enough to toss out a near instrumental and know it'll stick. And stick it did, number 7 and all, proof that sometimes you don't need a big story to make a big impact. Just a groove, a grin, and a good night to send the crowd home happy. For our penultimate song on playlist 18, we're back with another entry on Cliff Richard's glittering, unstoppable career, and we've just left the lush romantic haze of 1980 behind. Last time, Cliff was crooning alongside Olivia Newton-John on their Xanadu duet, Suddenly, a silky, dreamy number. Before that, we were swaying to the heartbroken 8 of Carrie, a top 5 hit from 1980 that showed Cliff could still tug at your soul. Now we're landing in early 1981, and Cliff's back with A Little in Love, a song that's equal parts tender and tentative, a soft pop confession that feels like a nervous first date. This is Cliff at his most human, leaning into vulnerability without losing that polished charm. Press play now. A Little in Love dropped in January 1981 as the second single from Cliff's 1980 album, I'm No Hero, following the upbeat Dreamin', which had already cracked the UK top 10 at number 8. Its release was delayed slightly because Cliff was busy stealing hearts with Olivia on Suddenly, but when A Little in Love finally hit, it was worth the wait. The single entered the UK charts on January the 24th, 1981, climbing to a peak of number 15 and hanging around for 8 weeks. Not his flashiest chart performance, Cliff was used to top 10 glory by now, but it was a solid hit, especially overseas. In the US, it spent 5 months on the Billboard Hot 100, peaking at number 17, and in Canada, it cracked the top 5. Europe loved it too, with strong showings across the continent. This wasn't a world-conquering banger, but it was a song that stuck with you, quiet and earnest. The track itself, written by Alan Tarney, who was basically Cliff's musical wingman in this era, is a masterclass in understated pop. Tarney, the unsung hero behind hits like We Don't Talk Anymore, crafted a sound that's warm and inviting, and dare I say, a little the same. It's got a gentle guitar riff and a rhythm that sways like a slow dance. Cliff's voice is front and centre, smooth but not slick, delivering lyrics that capture the awkward thrill of falling for someone. It's been so long, you say you've had fun, and you've been happy with the things you've done, he sings, setting the scene for a narrator who's sizing up their crush, feeling strange and a little unreal, a little in love. It's not a full-on love declaration, it's a hesitant step towards someone testing the water before diving in. That restraint is what makes it so relatable, Cliff's whispering across a crowded room. What makes A Little in Love special, though, isn't just the chart performance, it's the way it captures a universal feeling, those early fragile moments of attraction when you're not sure if you're ready to go all in. The lyrics, precise and unadorned, nail that in-between space. It's sweet without being sappy, hopeful without being desperate. And Cliff sells it, his voice carrying just enough longing in it to make you root for him. Compare this to what else was happening in 1981. The UK charts were a wild mix, as we've seen. Adam and the Ants with their pirate swagger, Spandau Ballet's new romantic sheen, and John Lennon's posthumous Just Like Starting Over, tugging at the heartstrings. Cliff's A Little in Love didn't try to compete with the flashier stuff, it just carved out its own quiet corner. And that's Cliff's superpower at this point. He's been around since the late 1950s. This is already his 4th decade in pop. He doesn't need to shout to be heard. He's the guy who shows up with a guitar and a smile, and somehow you're hooked. Later, in 1981, Cliff would keep the hits coming with Wired for Sound, a song we will definitely hear, a peppier number that hit number 4 in the UK, and Daddy's Home, which nearly topped the charts at number 2. But A Little in Love feels like the heart of this era for him, a moment where he let his mask slip just enough to show the guy behind the legend. It's not his biggest hit, not his loudest, it's just Cliff being Cliff. But to end playlist 18 and talking of bigger hits, track 13 today is a monster. Let's end this episode with Blondie, picking up where we left off with their sun-soaked reggae cover, The Tide Is High, which rode a wave to number 1 in the UK in November 1980 and held that spot for 2 weeks. That was Blondie flexing their genre-hopping muscle, turning a 1967 Paragons tune into a global smash. But now, we're diving into their next single from Auto American, released January the 12th, 1981, Rapture. This isn't just a song, it's a cultural pivot, a weird, glorious mess of new wave, disco and hip-hop that became the first number 1 song in the US with rap vocals. This is our final track today of Playlist 13. Press play now. Rapture hits you like a fever dream. Debbie Harry's voice slinks in, cool and detached, toe-to-toe, dancing very close, barely breathing, almost comatose. The groove, cooked up by Chris Steen and produced by Mike Chapman, is this slinky blend of chic-inspired disco and new wave shimmer, with Jimmy Destry's Tubular Bells adding a haunting vibe, like something out of a sci-fi flick. Then, halfway through, it swerves hard. Debbie starts rapping, yes, rapping, about a man from Mars who's eaten cars and eaten bars. The lyrics are absurd, playful, apocalyptic, and you drive all night and then you see a light and it comes right down and it lands on the ground and out comes a man from Mars. It's not exactly Rakim, but it's not trying to be. It's Debbie Harry, downtown art kid royalty, winking at a scene she and Steen had been soaking up in the Bronx and Brooklyn. Blondie weren't just tourists in hip-hop. Steen and Harry had been hanging with Fab Five Freddy, Lee Quinones and other pioneers since the late 1970s. Freddie took them to a rap event in the Bronx in 1978 where they saw MCs trading rhymes over breakbeats. They were hooked. Rapture name-checks Freddie, Fab Five Freddy told me everybody's fly, and Grandmaster Flash. Flash is fast, Flash is cool. This was a love letter to a subculture most of America didn't know existed. When Rapture dropped, it shipped 1 million copies in the US, went gold, and hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 2 weeks, starting in March the 28th, 1981. In the UK, it peaked at number 5, spending 10 weeks on the chart. Not their biggest UK hit, but it moved the needle. The music video, Pure East Village Chaos, directed by Keith. It debuted on Solid Gold on January the 31st, 1981, and was one of the first rap videos on MTV when the channel launched that August. It's a one-take wonder. Debbie struts down a Manhattan street past graffiti artists, a kid ballerina, an indigenous American, even a goat. William Barnes, the man from Mars in a white suit and top hat, choreographed the whole thing. Freddie's there, and so is 80s art icon Basquiat, subbing in when Flash's label wouldn't let him show. It's a snapshot of New York's art punk hip-hop collision, raw and unpolished. Now let's talk about the rap itself. Debbie's flow is, well, let's call it idiosyncratic. And you don't stop. Sure shot, go out to the parking lot. It's half spoken, half sung, more surreal poetry than street cipher. Some folks then and now call it cringy, like she was dabbling in something she didn't fully get, but that misses the point. Harry wasn't trying to out-rap Cool Mo D. She was channeling the energy of those Bronx block parties where rhymes could be silly or cosmic or both. As she told Entertainment Weekly in 2011, it was an homage to the form. Wu-Tang Clan and Mobb Deep later told her it was the first rap song they heard as kids because radio wasn't touching hip-hop back then. Rapture cracked that door open. Auto-American itself was a wild swing. After the polished punk disco of parallel lines and each of the beat, Blondie went full eclectic. Jazz, Broadway covers, and this rap disco hybrid. Critics were split. Some called it genius, others a bit of a mess. But Rapture proved Blondie's knack for taking risks that paid off. It wasn't their last hit, but it was their last US #1. By 1982, The Hunter flopped. Steen got sick with Pemphigus, and Blondie split. Harry went solo, did Videodrome, and Blondie didn't reunite until 1997. Rapture endures because it was the clarion call to an entire industry. It's been remixed, mashed up with The Doors' Riders on the Storm in 2005's Rapture Riders, and covered by everyone from Alicia Keys to Erasure. KRS-One flipped it into Step Into a World in 1997. It's a time capsule of a moment when punk, disco and hip-hop were rubbing shoulders in New York's grimy clubs. Blondie didn't just ride that wave, they helped make it. And Debbie Harry, with their platinum hair and deadpan delivery, was the perfect messenger. So that's it for playlist 18 as we kick off our 1981 Odyssey. But join us next time as we begin to move into February. We bring you John Lennon's other posthumous hit, We Are Rewarded by the Teardrop Explodes. We fall in love with a German film star, and we meet Talking Heads, amongst others. As always, if you can give us a cheeky follow on your podcast platform of choice, I'd really appreciate it. And during the week, you can find me on the socials as the 80s Mixtaper. Until then, have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Take care.